Thank you. Wonderful to be here. We're extremely excited about the posting of the first RFP. Is that loud enough? We've been working on this for a long time, and it's great to see it come to fruition. And it'll develop over time. So it's not as though we announced one thing and it's over. So you'll have to keep tabs on both CPB and PBS's website to see more opportunities. But let me back up a little bit and give a little bit of history about how we got here, because I think it's important. Both institutions have realized over the past couple of years, over the past few years, about the need to address the issue of diversity, and particularly on the national schedule, excuse me. And I've only been at CPB for about a year, and only in this position, actually about a month. But I was an acting VP of this job for I've been about 6 months, I think. But before I came on, I think it started with Joaquin Alvarado and the Diversity and Innovation Department, which was created last summer. There was this kind of renewed emphasis on the idea of diversity. And we decided jointly with PBS that we would create this special pot of money attached to the NPS. Some of you may not know the NPS is the National Program Service, which really provides, and I'll let John cover most of this, that's the money that funds the National Program Service, so primetime and children's primarily. We decided that we would attach, and CPB contributes a part of the money for that fund. We decided that we would set aside an additional part of money specifically to address the issues around diversity and innovation. And that idea started last summer as we were crafting our business plans for CPB for the new fiscal year, which started in September. And then there was a change in personnel, and I wound up coming on the scene, and then worked closely with John and his team to develop this, sort of the basic framework for what this fund would be. And that's been happening back and forth over there since about early January, and we've had really good discussions. There's a renewed emphasis at CPB on this particular idea, and we decided that for the purposes of this fund, starting out, the diversity would mean, and the definition will expand over time, we think, but for this particular fund, would be about ethnicity, and race and youth. So the primary idea, come on in, it's okay, just come on in. It's very casual. The primary idea is to try and address the issues of audience. And we're doing this at CPB both on the television side and on the radio side, because we recognize the need to attract a younger, more diverse audience to public media, across radio and television. And the web is not such a problem because that audience is younger. So what we've come up with, I think is very, very exciting. As I said, we've been working on a long time. I'm going to throw it to John, I think, to talk a little bit about the specifics of the fund, and we'll have a back and forth. There'll be plenty of time for questions. As I said, we'd like to keep this very casual, so feel free to jump in. Do you want to walk us through the fund?
Do you want to have our first back or forth and just walk them through what the four sort of broad categories of the overarching fund is?
Sure. It was it's a bit of a struggle to narrow it down, but we decided that this fund would cover four basic areas. One is television-centered multi-platform projects, and that's reflected in the RFP that was just released. There will also be digital initiative. There will be, we'll be looking for children's content, and we've set aside a pot of money for gaming. We think gaming is really important. We're not sure about the level of funding quite yet because gaming can be quite expensive, but we definitely want to be playing in that space and develop opportunities for producers.
That's right. So within that, we took a look at, within those four broad categories, we wanted to make sure that we had something tangible and in circulation for producers to see right away. And so we, along with the announcement of the Diversity and Innovation Fund, we've issued this request for proposals that you've been hearing us talk about. And it is, just to the degree that you can accept that this is a major component of it, but it is not the entirety of the Diversity and Innovation Fund and what it seeks to do. Joseph described 3 other broad categories that will be addressed as well. But this one coming out of the chute seeks to develop content for the PBS primetime schedule that would play as a weekly series, would be the notion of it, that would be a multi-platform project from the outset in terms of how it engages the audience, how it draws in content perhaps, and finds its distribution in addition to broadcast. The general content categories that we're looking at for this are the ones that are really in the sweet spot of PBS's audience and its primetime lineup of things like science, history, natural history, travel, exploration, and any interesting hybrid format combos that you can come up with that might be something we haven't imagined yet. Just in the name of trying to get clear direction here, this is not a fund to bring children's programs to. This is not a fund to bring news and public affairs programming to in a sort of a traditional sense of that category. And I think just in a matter of practically speaking, it's not a fund to bring continuing character drama to, just owing to budget constraints and so forth. Part of what we also want to do, speaking of budget, is we want to encourage producers to bring us concepts, formats, whatever you want to call it, that can be produced at a sustainable production level. One of the challenges that we face in public media and have perennially faced is the ability to sustain the good works we do. And in terms of having it produced at a dollars per hour level that is still turning out great content that's smart as a whip and engaging and fresh, but at the same time stands a chance of being able to continue on through a mix of funding that most public media programs have to find in terms of either direct funding from PBS/CPB and or foundations, corporations, whatever makes it work. We want to make sure that we're developing series and ideas that aren't so heavy that we can't get them off the ground, or once aloft, we can't keep them up there. So that's a tenet of this notion as well. We're very serious about the multi-platform aspect of it in terms of for a number of reasons. Obviously, there's just the ability to engage the audience and to have them do more than merely watch a program. It's the ability to allow, to some degree, the audience to more than engage, but perhaps participate in the content in a way. Again, we don't have firm notions here. We just want to put some lines on the road for producers so they know where we're headed, but we don't want the lines so close together that it forces out passion and inspiration. So those are some of the main tenets about what the RFP is. We can talk about the timeline, just in terms of what it means and where you can find more information. This week we got the proposal out in circulation. We've been working with, and we'll continue to work with the Public Media National Minority Consortia as sources for both getting the word out about this and also helping to make sure that a diverse talent pool is aware of this opportunity and is thinking about how they can approach it. We've posted it to the PBS, and I think we'll shortly have it up on the CPB website. I can give you an easy to remember URL, pbs.org/DI fund, all one word, DI for Diversity and Innovation Fund. And there you will find the information I'm going over, as well as the RFP process and so forth. So we got it out there this week. We'll expect to be getting proposals shortly thereafter. And we're going to say that the cutoff for submission is September 15th. So everything that's in by that point will be in for consideration. And then we'll be sorting through them, making sort of a first cut from what we expect will be a wide field of submissions. And then we'd like to do some things over the fall and into the late fall where we're using the audience to some degree to help us gather feedback and input about which of these ideas seem the most compelling. So sort of start with a long short list, if you will, give the audience a chance to comment and read and share and exchange on some of these ideas. We've done this before when we're developing a series, and we found it to be both useful and it was a good way just to start, buzz about the fact that we're doing this. And of course, we ultimately reserve the right to be the deciders. We're not going to leave it open to a pure public vote off. But it has been a great way to sort of crowdsource, feedback and information. Short list, an even shorter list from there. Probably something in the neighborhood of, 4. Whatever the question is, the answer is 5 plus or minus 2. Always remember that. So with those 4-ish, we'll move those into pilot and put these shows on their feet so that we can see what they look like. We can test drive some of the concepts, see if the producer's vision has a good strong through line, learn what we can from it, and again invite the audience into the process of reviewing those pilots and providing us feedback, and which may or may not include broadcasting the pilots. We'll just determine that as we go along. Formal testing as well at that point in time in terms of getting audience feedback in a more controlled research environment. And from there, fingers crossed, we've got something that's a clear winner that we then put on its feet with a 10-episode order, and then we go from there.
One of the things that I find most exciting and that I like most about the RFP is that it's pretty wide open, and I think it allows us, we're really casting a pretty wide net here. So there's a real opportunity, I think, for producers to surprise us, because it is very broad. Let me speak a little bit about the idea of measurability, which sort of is central to the DI fund. So we'll be looking to measure impact as much as we can, and ultimately we want the audience, we want to grow the audience. So we'll be looking at those numbers very carefully. We'll also be looking, I think for the first time, at a way to measure and sort of collect information about who's actually producing for the MPS, which is great because we've never had those numbers before. And it won't be, and we'll collect that data not just for the DI fund, but we'll design it in a way that we can collect data for the entire MPS, which I think is really important. I just want to underscore the idea of innovation in the development of production models. We aren't looking for big, high-dollar productions. Actually, we're looking, it's fairly, I wouldn't use the word modest because there's enough money that are doing really good work, but we're looking for people to really maximize efficiencies, and we're looking for innovation in storytelling, innovation in the development of production models.
Shall we stop here and take questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi. I'm curious, use the word show as kind of the way that public media is really used to, in particular PBS is used to thinking of what should ultimately, because of the innovation part of this whole deal, be a multimedia experience. But when you're looking at diverse audiences and people who have cell phones as a primary point of contact, wouldn't it be helpful to try to think of video podcasts and similar applications, things like that, as a way of working backwards towards TV rather than having the show throw to the web for, oh, here's your extra content, right?
No, I think you're absolutely right, and in fact, we're engaged in a couple of efforts in that direction right now, and so that's the kind of thinking that we're expecting to see here. I mean, not demanding, but we're open to that in terms of how the content is either first drawn in or first sourced and then put together into the television broadcast, as opposed to as you described, where the new media experience is just a companion to the television broadcast. Absolutely right. And to some degree, the way the shows themselves are built, or the content is created, should from the outset be, thought about how can we not later deconstruct it for other platforms, but from the outset, purpose built for those other platforms, and at the same time still hang together as a linear television program, because ultimately, it's going to wind up there too, and that is still, the single largest place to reach an audience at a given point in time, is through that outlet. So, we don't want to sacrifice one approach for the other if we can.
I had a question question on your video gaming initiatives, and I just need a little bit more clarification. Are you looking for a show that would be about the video game environment, diversity in the industry? Are you looking for something that's like auxiliary and created to go along with these, so that you have a game on the PBS website? Or are you looking for something about kind of how the game industry has evolved in terms of social justice and how it changes? Are you, like, what in particular are you looking for? Something to play or something to watch? I think I'd love to.
Good question. So the RFP has not been crafted for the gaming initiative yet. I think, and you correct me, that we'll be looking at at supporting games both on the children's side and as well as social issue sort of gaming, much like World Without Oil and that sort of thing that ITVS so successfully handled. I don't know yet whether these games will be standalone or whether they will be tied to a broadcast. I don't know, John, if you or your team has done any thinking yet.
I think, the first part of your question, it's not about creating television shows about the gaming industry.
Oh.
I mean, if that were to come up as, in some reasonable format, okay, but that's not the purpose of this particular aspiration. It's about the literal, creation and distribution of games to support, as Joseph said, both, in the kids' world, as well as for general audience, for primetime shows. And I'm open to the notion of there being a freestanding game that isn't necessarily attached to an existing, television brand or title, or yes, a game that is attached to an ongoing series or brand or title. I think, we're open to that in terms of which way it can break, and maybe the answer will be both in some cases.
So we know that gaming not only is a great way, it's a great learning tool for children, but it's also a great engagement tool. So I think we'll be looking to the community producers to help guide us.
Yes, I just wanted to be clear, for the TV center aspect of the RFP that's currently out there, are you imagining that there will be sort of one new primetime series that makes its way through this process, or is it possible that all the ones that make the short list could, if they're well received, make it to air? I'm just going to get a sense of what the end result will be.
Well, looking at the budget, and from this distance, I think we're being pragmatic to suggest that one will ultimately emerge as winner. I think it would be a great problem to have if we wound up with more than one format, series, approach, whatever you want to call it, that really seemed viable and wish you could have. I think just right now, for funds we have and how we've roughly allocated to them at this point, we should think about one emerging. But I'd love to figure out how to make two great shows work if that's what we had in front of us.
A quick follow-up, the funding plan beyond sort of this process, I'm assuming the portion of the fund is not going to cover like the run of the show. Are there thoughts around how this is being?
Well, the part of what we're going to ask of a producer submitting it is what would a funding plan be, from, and to some degree funding plans on day one or as you're developing something from scratch are a bit of a work of fiction. But it's good to have some sense of what is a funding strategy for a second season. The fund anticipates causing the first season to be produced. Anybody else? Sorry.
I assume when you mentioned series, you're still talking in terms of a traditional 13 series.
10 is what we're talking about in this particular case, yeah.
Okay, and why 10 and not 13?
Well, 13 has been a convention of the broadcast television. It's a quarter. It's a fourth of a year. For us, the math works better with 10. We don't have a 13-week run in the schedule contiguously where you wouldn't run into either a big blockbuster preemption and/or one of our beloved fundraising drives.
Well, that's about something else, just that we keep presenting something to PBS in general. Are you more amenable now to 10 episodes than 13? Because in the past, I know that's been an issue, where they come back and say, yeah, we need 13.
Well, it depends a little bit on what we're talking about in terms of format and where it's going to wind up in the schedule. Something that's more in the, for lack of a better term, the how-to category, those do tend to run in 13s, and it has to do with the fact that they're not in prime time and therefore not subject to this sort of preemption. Kids shows have a much different, sort of measure in terms of, a minimum of 40 typically to begin with a kid's strip. So it really it has something to do with where you're going to place it and what is the series itself. Mini-series, we're looking at, the notion of, for a big stunt in the schedule, and that's not what this RFP is about. But, something that is, somewhere in the, like I said, 5 plus or minus 2.
And is there a per episode budget that you have in mind? I'm trying to work the math backwards from $20 million, but I imagine it covers all 4 of your things.
Yes, it
The
does.
20 million isn't going to one.
Right.
Yeah, ding, ding, ding. And it's over 2 years. That number is 2 years worth of this fund, and as Joseph said, it's allocated across these things. But yes, in the RFP, you'll see that there's a target number that we want you to aim at $375 an hour for production, not for accessorization and
Promotion and marketing.
You're saying it does or does not include
Does
promotion?
not.
375 is not meant to cover everything from promotion to outreach to, all the stuff that supports a program.
And just a quick question, what types of communities are you pushing this message out to? Because looking at this as somebody that comes from a completely new media background, I'm very new into public media stuff, and it's a kind of an experiment for me. I'm looking at your RFP and things like that, and a lot of the people that we work with, particularly in the digital race space, would have never got this proposal.
Right.
And then you're also requiring hard copies to be sent, which might be for, I guess, ease of use or seriousness, but it's a little strange from the world that I come from. So just asking about, like, who are you reaching out to and who are you hoping to get? And if you're looking at those of us who are under 30 and very digital, and very wired into gaming and things like that, how are you going to help craft your RFPs so that they'll kind of reach us?
I think we'll be looking to our partners and working with our partners to help distribute the RFP to get it into the hands of folks. So the National Minority Consortia, ITDS, all the folks in public media. So I suspect it'll filter down.
But we're also very open if you feel like you've got, if you feel like you've got a suggestion of how to
Please tell us.
crack that door open, let us know. We'd be glad to know. Yeah, no, that'd be great. And the whole hard copy process, we flew about, 3 days last week? Trying to get the infrastructure up in time for this to actually get out.
There's a story there, and I suspect
It's not a good story.
subsequent RFPs, it'll be an electronic submission.
Yeah, we want to get there too.
From a very practical perspective, some of the other series, POV and Independent Lens, they go for 60-minute shows, over 90 minutes. Is there a similar time, not requirements, but are you looking for 60s or 90s, or is it open?
The series is ours, is what we're imagining, yeah. Jake, yes, Jake.
I missed the first part, but so the 10 part thing, is that 10 part a year or 10 each year over the 2 years? Could you propose, say, a reality show?
The reference to 2 years earlier was the fact that the fund is running over 2 years.
Right.
The series will be funded from this RFP is for 1 year, 10 parts.
Right, with the goal, planning for success, that, that it sticks and
It
it's
could go.
got traction and so forth. And that's why we'll also be looking for and asking for, from the producer's perspective, what could be a funding plan, not a funding plan that takes, the public television contribution to zero. That'd be grand if you've got one. But just that, contemplates after the fund steps away from this, and it has to then vie for NPS dollars just from the regular, whatever you want to call it, discretionary fund at PBS. What portion of that, what portion of foundation or corporate, how do you think you can sustain this down the road? So the funds right now specifically says it's going to put the first 10 up on its feet.
And do you have a sort of a, best case scenario of when you want the stuff to hit air?
Yeah, I think our timeline takes us all the way to broadcasting.
Well, it takes us through contracting.
And
Yeah,
then
20 feet, oh no.
so the notion is that by the end of the calendar year, right, this year, 2010, that we'll begin contracting for the pilots. Pilots will come in, and then I would think that the soonest you could probably anticipate having a decision and a series up and on its feet would probably be at the earliest, early 11 and more likely fall 1.
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around what the purpose of this is.
Of this specific RFP or the entire fund?
Well, just this conceptually, what I guess what I'm curious about is, so you're trying to create content that reflects a more diverse audience for PBS with multi-platform, but how do you propose to actually bring the audiences to watch it? I mean, it's one thing to create the content, but if you don't, and I say this with all due respect, because I've worked with NPR and on projects and done all sorts of things, but you can create the content, but if you don't have the outreach mechanisms or the connection to the community to get them to watch it, then
How are you going to have success? Yeah, no, it's a good point, and to some degree, I won't say that we've got it buttoned down, but it's contemplated in this, that not only within this specific RFP, but then within the other aspects of the fund, part of what we want to do is explore and exploit new means of raising awareness, of reaching audiences on their schedule, on the platforms that they're using, to rather than expect them to just merely come to television. When that works, and it's a powerful tool, but we also want to see how we can use new means of doing that kind of outreach and engagement to broaden just even awareness that this content exists. So you're right on. I mean, and one of the challenges the public television has faced throughout its history in trying to reach any audience, we don't do enough to let the world know what we've got, relative certainly to the competitors, sort of spend and effort around that.
right. I would just reiterate his statement earlier, his point earlier, that I understand it's TV and you want people to be watching TV, but I don't even watch TV, and I work in media. Like this is all I consume, and I watch everything and do everything over the internet. And so, and her point as well of like, I wouldn't even know how to get to this RFP because I'm not in that world. I'm concerned. I think this is wonderful, and I wish it all the success. But I'm still just concerned that the right kinds of connections are not yet being made to really conceive of how to get to these people to produce this content, and then how to actually get to the audiences that would want to watch the content. And so those are just, from what I see so far.
We're just getting started. So
Right, no, I
help us
know.
with
I'm
that.
sorry.
We have set
Friend,
aside
friend.
significant resources on the marketing promotion side. So we're not just going to let them die behind.
But you're right, it's not about running ads in the New Yorker. Let's go back here and I'll connect you.
What is an RFP?
Request for proposal. We're requesting you for proposals to us.
Okay.
And I've got, by the way, a limited number, but a bunch of the RFP. And we've also got a similar dose of the just sort of flyover of what the fund itself is, all of which is available on that URL I gave you earlier, pbs.org/DI fund.
Can you tweet it to us?
Pardon me?
Can you tweet
Can
it?
you tweet it to us?
I'm still busy telling people about trying to find shoes.
Jack it up on Twitter. Hashtag Upworks.
Wait, right.
What have you all built in any kind of capacity to reach non-English language audiences?
Good question.
Well, one of the areas that we're exploring is supporting the production or translation of content in the children's area specifically, but not, and we haven't really talked about the prime time. Are you referring to this specific series?
Yes, I'm just referring to what you all are trying to do with this particular.
Well, we've discussed it with only in the area of children's programming today.
Okay.
It
Yeah,
doesn't preclude the notion, but, so tell me how you do that and still attract as wide a general audience as one would expect on at least that one platform of television.
Well, I mean, it's a matter of actually, it's community outreach, just like you were talking about earlier. You said it's worked fairly well for you in the past. It'll work the same as long as you have people who are fluent in both worlds.
Go over that, Mike, please.
Hi, I have a question. I'm going to just introduce this gentleman This is Dr. Donald Bundy of Blue Bank, and we're trying to figure out what stories.
Hi there.
He's very nice. I don't think that is bad, but he's very nice. Yeah. So,
I don't know why I'm doing this.
I think she just put a big bullseye on it.
Yeah, exactly.
is any part of the fund going to look at international stories? Are you open to that?
Yes, sure. It doesn't preclude by any means.
So, what, stories about what's happening in Haiti now, you may consider looking at, or any other part of the world?
So long as it's differentiated from what you find on news coverage and so forth. I mean, these are meant to be programs that are additive to what's already there in the schedule, and then for a general audience in terms of interest. But absolutely, I mean, one of the not so much that it's hurtling toward this fund, or it may very well already be in my inbox. But we developed at PBS with Steve Talbot a program called Soundtracks, which is an interesting fusion of travel, music, politics, world culture. It, as an angle of approach, I think can take you to stories like that in a way that is additive and different and complementary to coverage of world events, if you know what I'm saying. So just if only by way of example, how you could come at that and also do what we're looking for.
Hi, I'm Wendy Levy, and I run programs at BAVAC in San Francisco. And I'm totally excited about this, and just wanted, for the producers in the room who've never perhaps thought about a transmedia project like this, we're lucky enough and very grateful to receive CPB funding for a Producers Institute that we run. The Institute itself only happens once a year, but there's a lot of content online on our website that are short stories from documentary filmmakers and public media producers who have gone through the process of creating transmedia, some really exciting stuff that I think would be the kind of projects that these great guys are looking for. And so please come and see me, and I'll give you cards, because these stories that we've been incubating are the kind of stuff we'd love to see on television and online doing this kind of work. And so if you haven't done this, there are resources and support out there to help you prepare this RFP.
All right.
Great.
We can have lunch.
Okay.
Thank you.